I woke up to the sound of falling rain. It was raining outside the window and Ellie was in my arms. The brown hair, which was a shortcut when I first saw it, came down to just below her shoulders. Between her closed eyes she could see her long eyelashes. Ellie slowly opened her eyes as if she felt her popularity. It's raining. Ellie crouched down on her body and dug deeper into her mine. As I kissed her, Ellie said with her eyes closed. Really? Are you going to be like this again in the morning? It's a holiday. Oh right. Is this Saturday? Then I can't go to work. Ellie's expression turned to happiness. The way she looks is so cute it's unbearable. We hugged each other and kissed. By the time I got up from bed the raindrops got thicker. We got dressed and went down to the first floor. It seems that Taikyu hasn't woken up yet. The rain was pouring down hard on the garden seen through the living room window. I made a coffee and handed it to Ellie. We sat next to each other in the living room listening to the rain and drinking coffee. Ellie gently rested her head on my shoulder. It's nice to have rain. Right? After the rain stops, won't the sweltering heat begin? Ellie drinking coffee is like a scene from an advertisement. Then I saw a coffee ad. It will be difficult to go out because it rains a lot. Then shall we watch a movie together at home? Good idea. Is there a movie you want to see? It's an action movie. Wouldn't it be fun? If you ask Taekyu, he will know. Ellie said she remembered something. Are you saying that Hollywood is making a big one movie this time? I heard about it. Professor Mohan agreed to advise. If you look at Hollywood movies, all kinds of disasters happen in America. Earthquakes, hurricanes, volcanic eruptions, floods, droughts, terrorism, wars, meteorite impacts, alien invasions. At this point there is no other hell for the people. Well, in the end the main character solves the problem and ends up waving the stars and stripes at the end. However, Big One, which occurred last year, far surpassed any cinematic imagination. Hollywood can't miss this good true story. Several films have already been made in this regard. Rather than directly showing the plight of Big One, it focused on the grief of those who lost their families, the bonds between people and the process of overcoming them. But this movie is a blockbuster. The setting is San Francisco and it deals with the horrors of the Big One. Actors who are regarded as the best in Hollywood have been confirmed to appear, and $700 million has been set for pure production costs alone. The person holding the megaphone is up-and-coming director Arthur Farrar. As each of the works released so far has received great praise from the public and critics, there was a lot of anticipation as to what kind of movie would be made. Making a movie that deals directly with Big One means that the United States has recovered from the shock of the disaster. Ellie said, sipping her coffee. Now all that is left is urban reconstruction. Paradoxically, the reason California hasn't been able to rehabilitate the city for a year and a half is because the damage has been so great. The federal government and the state of California have focused their efforts on restoration efforts in areas with relatively little damage. San Francisco and Silicon Valley, where the entire city has collapsed, are still in the process of retrieving bodies along with the removal of debris. Even now, day by day, a body was excavated from the wreckage and after identification, it was handed over to the bereaved family. When the entire family died, the state funeral was held. Now that the restoration of the surrounding area has been completed, everyone's eyes turn to San Francisco. It's not like the state has been playing around. He coordinated the interests of landowners and homeowners, and made a city reconstruction plan. As President Ronald promotes America First, the first priority is of course for American design companies and American construction companies. However, even if the U.S.'s construction capabilities are fully mobilized, the number of workers is insufficient. The rest is, of course, the responsibility of other countries. With just the dripping Congo, everyone will be satisfied. As it is the largest restoration project in U.S. history, construction companies around the world have expressed their willingness to participate. This includes Chinese construction companies. A trade dispute is a trade dispute and business is business. The U.S. urban reconstruction industry was like a rainstorm of drought for the stagnant domestic construction industry. All of them completed full preparations by recruiting manpower from the U.S. subsidiary. Korean construction companies are recognized worldwide for their capabilities, and they have experience building skyscrapers several times. Petronas Twin Towers in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, Light Towers in Korea, and even Burj Khalifa in Dubai, the world's tallest tower, were built by Korean builders. If you listen up to this point, You can be proud of Korea's construction technology. However, if you look a little deeper, the reality is quite different. All of the core technologies such as design, basic design, and seismic design were monopolized by Western advanced countries. This is also true of buildings built in Korea. The construction companies simply followed the instructions from above, gathered local workers, and built it according to the blueprint. In fact, it is a subcontract. Take you heard my story and said, originally, Koreans are good at solving exam questions. No one raises a hand when I tell them to present. That's right. No country can beat Korea by doing what it is asked to do. The reason why the design ability is poor compared to the building ability is that the construction companies did not invest properly. There is a difference in degree, but anything comes with money to get results. And the design field is already a solo stage for global companies. It's a vicious cycle of not being able to take on a challenge because you don't have experience and not gaining experience because you can't take on a challenge. In any case, the key to construction is design. What materials to use and how to build it is all decided at the design stage. A kid took part in a design bid and won city designs for 2 cities, Palo Alto and Redwood City. This was a huge achievement. Being in charge of design means having the power to control the construction companies in charge of construction. The added value is also not comparable to that of construction companies. Archit has its own unique technology for designing using artificial intelligence and machine learning. In addition to using the program for design, just input data and extract the optimal design for it. In this way, the cost can be cut in half and the working time by a third. In addition to the income from the immediate design, the way to participate in other designs in the future was opened as the technology was recognized. When the news broke, Archit was valued at $10 billion. This amount far exceeds the market cap of Unsung Construction, the largest construction company in Korea. The world is always busy. When I went to work on Monday, there was a pile of reports piled up on my desk. Archit's urban design progress, Keris's sales market expansion, OTK Games relocation, a letter of intent to participate in investment from a private equity fund, etc. The move to OTK Games and the development of virtual reality games were warmly welcomed by the city of Michigan and Detroit. I'm going to Detroit soon to meet the governor. Speaking of a governor, it feels like a mayor or governor, but in reality he has a higher status than the president of any country. The reason you can meet such a person like this is probably because you have a lot of money. In fact, it was also Carlos who brought Detroit back to life. Once a symbol of a fallen city, it has now been reborn as the center of American manufacturing. Related companies moved in one after another and house prices rose sharply. Residents are dumbfounded. No one dislikes that companies come in and jobs are created. Of course, there are countries that expel even good companies out of the country due to useless regulations. Among the documents uploaded by the secretary was a letter from a foreign publisher. I ripped it open and read it. Take, you asked. What is it about? I'll give you money, so I want to publish a book. In addition, I have received similar offers dozens of times. Several publishers offered up to $5 million in advance tax. This is the largest amount in the publishing industry. How much money do you make from selling books? From my point of view, I refused because it was enough money to have it or not. And I don't even have anything to write about. Can't you tell me to look at your foresight and invest? Well, even if it's not me, there are many people in the world who can't publish books. If you go to bookstores, you will find all kinds of economic management books. People who write books always exaggerate their investment vision and returns. They brag about how much money they made in a short period of time by buying dozens of stocks or apartments. Of course, some of them wrote books with the intention of passing on their know-how and values to future students. Benjamin Graham, Peter Lynch, Warren Buffett, etc. However, many of them aim to make money by selling books or to attend lectures using the reputation of publishing books. Even though the parties are living on royalties and lecture fees rather than investment income, books are sold like wings and people flock to listen to the lectures. Taeyong nodded his head. There are so many scammers in this small land. Just looking at the Gile gold coin situation. Is Namu Choi still on trial at the detention center? 2 o'clock now. Shouldn't I be more concerned about you than that? This time he applied for bottle bail because he was not feeling well. If it is a general complainant, military bail is not permitted unless it is just before entering the coffin. But if it was a former president, it would be different. Sanjiop Sr. also went out because of work. and Taikyu went to meet the game company presidents with Kihong Sr. He headed to the cafeteria alone after a quick bite with a sandwich and juice. As I was eating alone lonely, someone came with a plate. "Can I sit here?" Then, when I nodded, Yuri quickly sat down across from me. Today I wore a gray suit. His blonde hair was neatly tied together. "Is the job worth it?" Yuri replied with a smile. "I am working hard with the heart of learning." Isn't that a very standard answer? I'm serious. Economic channels were played on the TV on one side of the restaurant. A man was giving an investment lecture analyzing unlisted stocks. He is a young, neat-looking man in his late 20s. Yuri asked gently. "Read more at wuxiax.com. Do you know who that person is?" I shook my head. "No. Are you famous?" "My name is Ho-Jin Park and he's pretty famous here these days." Yuri babbled and explained. Park Ho-Jin, a self-proclaimed analyst and investment expert, said that after taking a leave of absence from a prestigious university, he invested in stocks in his early 20s and hit several jackpots. He is currently the CEO of Fantastic Investment, a company specializing in investment, living in a 200-pyeong mansion in Cheongdam-dong, and driving a Bugatti Veyron, which is one of the few in Korea. He is a car owned by the late chairman Im Tu-kwon. Now Chairman Im Jin-yong sold it. Unlike me, who rarely appears in the media, he appeared in various entertainment shows as well as investment lectures, and showed off his wealth through social media. At the same time, he shouted out that his investment skills are superior to those of Kong Jin, and that he is ahead of him if he competes with the yield. Then why didn't I even know it existed? It's a different class. Anyway, that's great. It would not be easy to achieve that level of success at such a young age. Yuri stared at my face. What is it? It's amazing that the CEO said something like that. After all, I am the one who achieved the greatest success at a young age. Yuri lowered his voice and continued speaking. My dad says he's a swindler. Okay, you may have real talent. A person like that must be quietly getting his fortune from somewhere. According to my father, there is no one who is not a scammer who comes out in the press and says he made a lot of money. That's very true. It's a world where just being famous makes money. If you're famous, it's easy to cheat. People usually live by being aware of their abilities. If he is an ordinary office worker, he does not think that he will be able to start go and beat top knights from now on, or start playing soccer and play in the Premier League. However, only stocks are different. Everyone who jumps into the stock market is confident that they can make a bigger profit than the experts if they just put in the effort. If he thought his investment skills were inferior to those of experts, he would have signed up for a fund instead of investing in stocks and entrusted the management to the fund manager. As it is a place where everyone is overconfident in their own abilities, scammers also play a game. The funny thing is, there's a difference between a good investor and a scammer. If you raise money from investors and make a profit, you become an outstanding investor, and if you lose money, you become a scammer. Nick Leeson, the bankrupt of Barings Bank, is a prime example. I watched TV. There, a young man in his late 20s wearing a suit was recommending unlisted stocks with a confident expression. Which one is that person? I'm working on my way to work, Taekyu said. You are now number one in real sorts. Huh. I can't count how many times I've been number one in real-time search so far. Not long ago, when I was competing with the leisure department over the game regulation issue, I also took first place. But lately, isn't there a problem with it? I opened the portal site. Park Ho-Jin, CEO of Fantastic Investments, announced that it is ahead of last year's strong performance. Will Fantastic Investment grow into the second OTK company? Unlike OTK Company, which has a corporation in a tax haven, Fantastic Investment is a native Korean investment company. Young investor Ho-Jin Park. What is the secret to his success? Park Ho-Jin, a genius of startup investment. Invest in various new industries that will lead the future. Park Ho-Jin with Bugatti's photo at dawn. If you sleep, you dream, but if you don't sleep, you achieve your dreams. In order to surpass OTK Company within 5 years, I will not stop today as well. Taekyu, who was lying on the sofa, jumped up. Ugh. I just got first place in the real sword by Park Ho-Jin. Are you going to stay like this? What to say? I clicked through a few articles and read them. Park Ho-Jin, who is known to have made money by investing in stocks after taking a leave of absence from a prestigious university, established an investment company called Fantastic Investments. It was from last year that he started making his name known to the public in earnest. He appeared as an over-the-counter stock expert on Korea Economy TV, one of the cable economic channels. He became famous by steadily posting photos of supercars, including the Cheongdam-dong mansion and Bugatti, on social media, and thanks to that he entered the entertainment industry. As it became famous, the viewership ratings for investment broadcasts increased significantly, and the media also made it more popular. Now, posting photos or saying anything on social media is enough to become an internet news article. The media eagerly lifted him up as a self-made genius investor, or the second Kang Jin-ho. Taekyu, who was looking through the article together, couldn't hide his surprise. Wow. Were there any such fantastic investors in Korea? I will catch up after the strong earthquake soon. He invests mainly in privately held companies. Unlike listed companies listed on the Kospi and Kosdaq, unlisted companies are not easy to trade. Of course, there are over-the-counter exchanges that specialize in trading only the stocks of these companies, but the convenience of trading is not comparable to that of listed stocks. In the case of listed companies, sales, operating profit, and financial status are disclosed, and audits are conducted periodically. However, private companies are free from such obligations. Therefore, accurate valuation is not easy, and this is a factor that undervalues the stock. However, on the other hand, if you can pick out the rough stones, it means that you can get a huge return that is hard to compare with investing in a listed company. If you look at it up to this point, it is similar to the way OTK company grows, but there is one big difference. Taekyu asked at my words. What? Receive investment from the general public. To be precise, they are actively selling not only their unlisted stocks, but also fantastic investment stocks. In our terms, it would be like selling off the stakes in Keris, Facet, and OTK company. Park Ho-jin enticed investors by saying that once it is listed, you can earn at least several dozen times to at least 1,000 times more. He often cited OTK company as an example. In fact, we have achieved such a return through investment in startups. However, Taeyong narrowed his eyes. If you have stocks that will go up hundreds of times if they are listed, you should own them even if you are in debt, so why sell them to others? I'm sorry to eat alone. Or philanthropy. OTK company, which started with only 13.8 billion won in capital, is currently valued at over 13.8 billion won. If only 1% had been bought in the beginning, it would have made more than 10 trillion won. However, we did not receive any external investment and we only own the shares. But when someone establishes a similar type of company and the media calls it the second Kang Jin-hyuni and the second OTK company, did people rush in with money? You say you did pretty well though. Some of the over-the-counter stocks recommended on the show have risen more than 30 times. Anyway, the outcome of an investment is one of two things. Rising or falling. It's like tossing a coin. I recommend 10. Isn't it weird if one or two of them don't fit? As long as you turn on the economic channel, all kinds of investment experts come out around the clock and talk non-stop about stocks and real estate. I don't know what the hell they are doing, but they all have the title of Director of the Institute. Director of Real Estate Trading Research Institute, Director of Equity Investment Research Institute, Director of World Economic Research Institute, etc. Is this a real research institute or is it the name of a laboratory when studying at home while watching the internet? You might think that a health program is similar to hiring a doctor and a legal program hiring a lawyer and hearing their opinions, but at least those people have a doctor's license and a lawyer's license. However, there is no means to prove that an investment expert is an expert. There is no way to determine whether the person is really talented or whether he made money by investing. What comes out is fixed. Recommending a specific stock or real estate and recommending that you buy it as it will go up. Surprisingly, these people either invested in these stocks first, or they brokered real estate to collect commissions. If what you're saying is right, it's good, otherwise it's not. In order to avoid liability, broadcasters display captions before and after the program that say, experts' recommendations are personal opinions, and they are not legally responsible for the investment results based on the information provided. Among these experts, Park Ho-jin is the most popular case. Would you like to show your face even in the entertainment industry? While we were chatting while watching a video of Taekyu and Park Ho-jin, Senior Sang-yeop came up to the CEO's office. Sang-yeop, who heard our story, said, Park Ho-jin. I met him once. Okay. We met by chance at some kind of party. They shake hands and say I respect you. How does your senior look? Sanjiop-senpai answered my question as if he had nothing to think about. How is it? Just looking at it is silly. Successful entrepreneurs and investors have a unique charisma or atmosphere. Do you know what it feels like? I nodded. I know. But there is nothing like that. I was curious and looked at some companies that they invested in, but these are places I've never heard of. What I do is more like a salesperson than an investor. The media say it's the second Kong Jin-Hu. At Taekyo's words, Sang Yeep smirked. It's just a press play. Could it be a comparison in the first place? Taeyong patted my shoulder. Even though they boast of Cheongdam-dong mansions and Bugatti, compared to Jin Hui, they are no less poor neighbors. There are a lot of these guys in Uedo these days. After setting up an appropriate investment company, they hold investment lectures and snoop around broadcasters to raise money. 90% of them are scammers. No matter what Park Ho-jin is doing, it doesn't matter to me. She's not avoiding me either. However, Taekyo seems to have a different opinion. What do you mean? Shouldn't the growing scammers be lightly trampled on? It's annoying, right? Taekyo chuckled. It's fun. What's your hobby, catching scammers? Taekyo called team leader Jong Ki-hong. Please talk to Golden Gate and find out about fantastic investments and the companies they have invested in. Let's check if we have the right to beat Kong Jin-Hu and take first place in real swords. OTK Company started as an investment company and has grown into a mega conglomerate. Until then, the largest investment company in the world was Berkshire Cashier. However, the current market cap of OTK Company is estimated to be twice that of Berkshire Cashier. What's even more surprising is that this has been achieved in just a few years. After the success story of OTK Company became known, everyone dreamed of becoming a second and third OTK company. Investment companies came up one after another, and people who claimed to be the second and third Kong Jin-Hu appeared. Park Ho-jin was one of them. As an ordinary stock investor, he saw the success of OTK Company and established fantastic investment with the money he earned so far to invest in startups. However, he did not have the same insight as Kong Jin-Hu. Far from growing into unicorns, the companies he invested in collapsed within a few months. All the stocks they bought were in danger of becoming scraps of paper. He roamed around to resell the stock he held to avoid losses. Of course, he promoted it not as a company that will go out of business soon, but as a company that will grow hundreds of times if it goes public in the future. But strangely, there were many people who wanted to buy the stock. This is also because of Kong Jin-Hu's success. People think that when they see someone who has reached the top, whether studying or exercising, it must have been supported by tremendous effort and talent. But investing is different. Nothing seems as easy as making someone else's money. Just find a company like Caris or Facet and put your money in it. From then on, he began to walk the steps of a scammer in earnest. Being visible to scammers is more important than anything else. He moved to a mansion in Cheongdam-dong and bought a Bugatti by force. And he boasted that he was wealthy through his successful investment through social media. At the same time, the media was also paying attention. The concept of a successful investor in the same age as Kong Jin-Hu was what all the media wanted. After appearing as an over-the-counter stock expert on Korea Economy TV, everything went well. Stocks of little value were sold at prices tens or hundreds of times with a single word of his. He lived in a mansion, drove several supercars and dated models from idol groups. He truly has achieved everything he has ever dreamed of. The media rushed to report his success, and Ho-jin Park spoke proudly in several investment lectures and broadcasts. He said, "We will list fantastic investment on the Kosdaq within this year. The market cap is expected to be 3 trillion. If the startups we are currently investing in are listed one after another, the value of fantastic investment will increase to more than 30 trillion won. We will grow fantastic investment into a company that surpasses OTK Company within 5 years." As Park Ho-jin's fame grew, an unexpected amount of money rolled into his hands. And the money raised his reputation again. The media praised fantastic investment as Korea's largest investment company after OTK Company. But this situation cannot last long. The fraud is bound to be uncovered someday. Park Ho-jin also felt insecure. He thought he had to clean up and run away sooner or later, and he was slowly getting ready. If he's cheating anyway, he should get as much money as he can. So today he gathered hundreds of people and enthusiastically engaged in over-the-counter stock sales under the guise of an investment lecture. Fantastic Investments will soon enter into the selection of a listing manager. For this, KYB Securities and other securities companies are competing. Currently, Fantastic Investment is trading at 30,000 won over the counter, but the offering price is expected to be 900,000 won. This is your last chance to become a shareholder of Fantastic Investments. People opened their eyes and listened to him. Then suddenly people started screaming. Everyone took out their phones and looked at them in surprise. No one was listening to the lecture anymore. Someone raised a hand and shouted, "Is it true that Fantastic Investments is a scam?" Yes. At that moment the people in the lecture hall all stood up and shouted, "What? Was this a scam? Are you selling trash stock to us now? Give me back my money." Park Ho-jin panicked and took out his cell phone from his pocket. In the news section of the portal site, the announcement of the OTK Company PR team was floating as breaking news. OTK Company is analyzing companies scheduled to be listed for financial investment. However, in the case of Fantastic Investments and several companies that it has invested in, it is highly likely that they will not meet the listing requirements and will suffer serious insolvency. As fraud is suspected, we ask investors to be cautious. Park Ho-jin was shocked. What? Why is Kang Jin-woo so interested in a pyramid like me? Park Ho-jin, who appeared on Korea Economy TV, said it was unfair. Fantastic Investments is expected to receive large amounts of investment from Chinese and Hong Kong investors. However, all those investment plans have been cancelled. How is this different from a large corporation going out to kill SMEs? But I will never be disappointed. I will do my best to the end, even for the investors who believed in me. Conservative media, which has accumulated a lot over the years, published articles defending Park Ho-jin. Kicking the ladder by Jin Ho-kong. Checker jealousy. Strategy. Compared to the rapid industrial development in Korea, the investment culture has not matured properly. In foreign countries where investment culture is developed, it is not uncommon for successful investors to lead younger investors. In a book he wrote, Warren Buffett feared that an investor like him would never appear in America again. But this time Jin Ho-kang's behavior is the exact opposite. As if she had climbed her own and kicked her ladder, she put her new investment firm in jeopardy by raising unfounded allegations. Now that the financial market is struggling, it is more important than ever to be ethical as an investor. At the very least, checks or jealousy should never undermine the reputation of a young investor who is just starting to make a name for himself. Unfortunately, public reaction was cold. Park Ho-jin, because I'm sick. I've known it since I was riding a Bugatti. Hey, he said, I'll jump over it after the earthquake. What is it? No, Jin Ho-kang might be wrong. It sounds like you're threatening your place. Aren't you doing that to kill me? What the hell are you doing? Are you doing that for yourself? What is this? Bill Gates downloading Windows illegally, and Warren Buffett getting investment advice from a new employee at a brokerage firm. This is unconditionally true of Kang Jin-woo. I would believe one person after Kang Jin-woo rather than 100 other experts. Right. When it comes to money, Jin Ho-kang is absolutely right. Real. My grandfather cussed me for being a pro-North Red gang every day after a strong earthquake, but when the OTK company said where he invested, he turned on the lights and looked at the related stocks. Even the members of the Parents Association who are rallying for Park Si-hyung's release put their wrists on the belief that if Jin Ho-kang shoots one stock, they all run to the securities company. I don't know if it's a leftist or a leftist. The important thing is that no investment has failed so far. As the suspicion grew, investors who bought unlisted stocks believing only Park Ho-jin's words rushed to the company to ask for their money back. Then Park Ho-jin took the time to exchange it for Fantastic Investment stock. As complaints from investors flooded in, the financial authorities launched an investigation. Nevertheless, Park Ho-jin continued to appear on the air and complained about his injustice, and shouted out that Fantastic Investment had no problem. However, as the investigation began in earnest, he was arrested at Incheon International Airport while trying to depart for Singapore on the pretext of attracting investment. Prosecutors charged him with violating the Capital Market and Financial Investment Business Act. The results revealed that the business plan was sloppy and the size of the assets was exaggerated. The building used for the Cheongdam-dong mansion and office was rented on a monthly basis, and the Bugatti was purchased by lease. Unfortunately, it could not be repaired, so it was parked in a parking lot recently. The scam was simple. After he spread false information through broadcasts or lectures, he bought unlisted stocks at a bargain price and sold them back to investors at tens or hundreds of times the price to get unfair profits. The media was most responsible for this. Although introducing him as an over-the-counter equity investment expert, he has not undergone even minimal verification. Those who watched the broadcast and invested in Park Ho-jin were stunned. When he was arrested, the media outlets that had been floating in the meantime shut their mouths all at once. The number of victims is 5,000. The amount of damage exceeded 100 billion won. It turned out that the over-the-counter stocks that Park Ho-jin sold were worthless if they just went public. These are companies that are likely to go bankrupt rather than go public. Victims rushed to get their money back, but Park Ho-jin had already received a foreclosure and he did not repay the money, saying he had no money. However, he entrusted the defense to Young and Kim, the largest law firm in Korea, to form a luxurious defense team of 10 lawyers. This is one of the problems of financial fraud. Victims are worried about their livelihood because they have no money, but the perpetrators hire public defenders with the money they scammed. In effect, you are defending yourself with the victim's money. You looked at Park Ho-jin, who was arrested, and said, "Gile gold coin and fantastic investment. Why are there so many scammers in this country? Because Korea is tolerant of financial crime. This is also a big cultural difference. In developed countries, trust is more important. Therefore, they are strictly held accountable for actions that break trust. If the amount of damage exceeds a certain level, life imprisonment is sometimes imposed. However, in Korea, even if you make more than 10 billion won, it's over when you live a few years. Some people cheat and then hide their money and turn themselves in. If you surrender, your brother will be relieved. After being released from prison, he is living with the hidden money. In order to prevent this, Korea should also increase the sentence for financial offenses. They have to rot in prison for 2 or 30 years, so what's the use of the billions out there? I shook my head. In a way, financial criminals are worse than murderers. A murderer kills 1 or 2 at best, but a financial criminal destroys countless families and drives families to commit suicide. I flew to Michigan with Take-You in a private plane to meet Governor Hubble Butler. Although Governor Butler is a Democrat, he supported Ronald during the presidential election. Because Ronald promised to create a job here. He was pointed out at the time as a traitor within the Democratic Party, but he was right. Because now his approval rating is over 70%. We sat down and chatted comfortably. Detroit is currently experiencing an unprecedented boom. Attracting the game industry, including OTK games, is another achievement. Facet also decided to build a research lab to research VR technology and car infotainment. At this point, re-election is a winning party. It will be of great help when I go to another election later. So Governor Butler warmly welcomed us. Come here. Entrepreneurs who invest money and create jobs are welcome wherever they go. We talked about state support. Negotiations in the broad framework had been completed before the meeting, and it was a meeting to confirm it. Governor Butler expressed his hopes and promised active support for administrative procedures and taxes. We then went to the Karis headquarters. Daryl, as always, looked very tired. As soon as he saw us, he said sternly, "It's also a problem that cars sell so well. Production is on track and sales in the US continue well. Fortunately, we got out of the production hell we were worried about. If you buy 10 servings of ingredients and then sell food, it's worth it until you sell it to 5 people. The 6th person makes a profit and the 7th person doubles the profit. Comparing the sale to 6 people and 10 people, the difference in sales volume is less than double, but the profit is 5 times greater. In other words, if there is a company with twice the sales in the same industry, the actual net profit is several times that difference. With the factory running non-stop, Karis profits have soared. If you use this to invest in new industries and technology development, you can continue to widen the distance with latecomers. Karis has now become a standard for autonomous driving and electric vehicles. Not only the US government, but also governments around the world used Karis's car as a standard when issuing related permits. I plan to work with the International Organization for Standardization (ISO) to create international standards for autonomous driving and electric vehicles. The International Organization for Standardization, as its name suggests, is an organization that makes international standards. When the standard is set here, most companies follow it. Currently, the electric vehicle market is divided into high-priced models that use OTK batteries and equipped with autonomous driving, and mid- and low-priced models that use NCM batteries. Thanks to the advent of OTK batteries and the operation of TS Company, global battery production has increased significantly. The price of cobalt, which once accounted for more than 30% of the cost of batteries, has plummeted, and the price of NCM batteries has fallen significantly. A fall in price led to an increase in demand. Companies that think they cannot compete with Keris in terms of technology have poured out electric vehicles at low prices using NCM batteries that have plummeted. However, the rapid spread of electric vehicles has caused a serious problem. I sighed inwardly. When I released the AD3 and AD4, the self-driving electric vehicles I was aiming for, I thought everything was over. It's like starting now. Daryl smiled bitterly at my words. Maybe once we get this sorted out, another one will start. Having a lot of work to do in the future means there is room for further growth. Should you think good? I took the AD4 with Take You and headed to the OTK lab. Even if I wasn't holding the steering wheel, the car drove along the lane coolly. When I stopped at the signal, the drivers around me looked at me curiously. Only 300 AD3 and AD4 entered Korea. As it has not yet been officially sold in Korea, it is more than a Ferrari in terms of rarity. Even if it is not sold, you can rent it through a car-sharing company. There are so many applicants, so even if you apply now, you have to wait 2 or 3 months. Professor Haman Kim welcomed us warmly. I had a hard time coming here. It's hard. I came here to play. As we sat down, Professor Haman Kim poured hot water over the mixed coffee and served it. Take-You doesn't usually drink coffee, but he drinks mixed coffee occasionally. Take-You took a sip and admired it. Hey, coffee and magazines are also Maxim. Can I do an advertisement? About 200 researchers are actively conducting research at the OTK Research Center. Half of these researchers are foreigners. Professor Haman Kim is currently the highest authority in the battery industry. Perhaps because of that, he wanted to work with many researchers from all over the world. Daewoo is the best as it is operated with OTK battery patent fees. Even after receiving the Nobel Prize, Professor Haman Kim was busy. He developed a technology related to vehicle wireless charging technology and started commercializing it with Seosong SB. And he is currently developing another battery. Is it the battery center to be precise? We are developing a battery that can store the electricity produced by a small power plant. Professor Haman Kim explained while drinking coffee. For the past few decades, the world has tolerated environmental degradation for economic growth. But now things are a little different. This is because the environment has been destroyed to such an extent that economic growth is no longer possible. The factory emits fumes. For economic growth, even if there is some inconvenience, we have to endure it. However, if the smoke has reached the point where people cannot breathe, the factory has no choice but to shut down. Or build a factory that emits no or less soot. Environmental problems are not a problem that can be solved just by 1 or 2 countries' efforts. Developed countries are seriously aware of this problem and have entered into international treaties to solve the problem. Representative examples are the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Agreement on Climate Change. Take-You, who was listening to the story, said, "Didn't President Ronald withdraw from the Paris Agreement?" Professor Haman Kim nodded his head. Unfortunately, it seems that President Ronald is not interested in environmental issues. To the extent that they openly say that global warming is a story made up by conspiracy theorists. Unlike other developed countries, the United States has not been active in solving environmental problems from the past. So I withdrew from the Kyoto Protocol. In any case, reducing greenhouse gas emissions is now a global goal. Therefore, each country has put efforts to increase the share of energy with low greenhouse gas emission. Germany is one of the most active countries. The Fukushima nuclear accident in 2011 once again reminded the world of the dangers of nuclear power. As a result, several countries, including Japan, which were victims, declared to phase out nuclear power, and many countries decided to reduce the proportion of nuclear power plants. Germany has phased out nuclear power and has greatly increased the share of renewable energy sources such as solar and wind power. The most important thing in power is certainty. But in the case of solar or wind, you can't even predict what the output will be in 5 minutes. Sometimes it's overproduced, sometimes it's underproduced. If you keep the excess electricity as it is, the power grid will be broken. Therefore, it is necessary to send it to the area where it is needed immediately. Germany has established a power exchange system with neighboring countries for this purpose. If the weather is good and the amount of electricity produced is high, it is sent to another country, and if it is insufficient, electricity from another country is used, and so on. The problem is that when you sell you get a low price, but when you buy you have to pay the full price. Because the only thing I regret when buying or selling is Germany. The German government was also aware of this problem and was working on ways to store the energy produced in batteries. The weight and volume of batteries used in automobiles and electronic devices are important. But if it's for energy storage, you don't have to worry too much about that part, so the unit price can be greatly reduced. The problematic part is that the maximum charge capacity decreases as charging and discharging continue, and we are researching ways to slow it down as much as possible. By creating a battery center around a wind power generator or solar panel, if a lot of electricity is suddenly produced, it will be automatically charged, and then the electricity stored in the battery will be discharged when the production volume drops. This opens the way for efficient use of renewable energy. Great. When I admired Professor Haman Kim smiled bitterly. Yeah, this is also an unfinished book. It only makes renewable energy more efficient. It doesn't increase electricity production itself. I nodded. Anyway, Daryl was also concerned about that. As the years go by, electricity consumption is increasing rapidly. There are several factors to this. First of all, due to the development of technology, the number of electronic devices used is increasing. In addition to the electronic devices used at home, there are new air purifiers, clothes management devices, dryers and AL speakers. All of these are powered by electricity. Climate change is also a problem. All over the world, summers are getting hotter and winters are getting colder. As a result, electricity consumption for heating and cooling has also reached an annual record high. The amount of electricity used by companies such as data centers and servers continues to increase. A bigger problem than all of these problems combined is electric vehicles. Unlike conventional internal combustion locomotives that use gasoline and diesel to heat their engines, electric vehicles use electricity to drive their motors. Electric vehicles are much more energy efficient than internal combustion engine vehicles. Therefore, it has the effect of reducing the total energy consumption, but instead increases the electricity consumption explosively. Because of this problem, there was at one time a prospect that hydrogen cars would take over the hegemony of future cars. However, thanks to the development of OTK batteries, electric vehicles have completely pushed out hydrogen cars. Most experts predicted that electric vehicles would replace internal combustion locomotives in earnest as early as 3 years later, and countries were also preparing accordingly. However, when Carlos introduced the self-driving electric vehicle, that time was much earlier than expected. This year is no different than the first year of electric vehicles. It is expected that 1 in 10 new car sales this year will be electric. And by next year that percentage will rise to over 30%. In other words, more than 10 million electric vehicles are dumped on the roads every year. However, compared to the explosive growth of electric vehicles, the expansion of power plants and power grids has been slow. Fearing that electric power growth could not keep pace with the growth of electric vehicles, some countries have moved to reduce the supply of electric vehicles by reducing subsidies or benefits given to electric vehicles. However, EV prices are falling faster than subsidies are decreasing. If the power problem is not resolved, there may be a situation where electric vehicle sales must be restricted. Is Korea okay? At Taegyu's question, Professor Ho-min Kim shook his head. It's not very good. From the second half of this year, electricity consumption will increase significantly more than the government expected. Power generation has to match the maximum amount of electricity. For example, I usually use 50, but if I use 100 at any moment, I need to have a facility that can generate at least 110. This year, no matter how hard I try, the next problem is the problem. Following Germany, Japan, and Taiwan, South Korea also announced that it would phase out nuclear power. It stopped the construction of new nuclear power plants and banned the extension of the lifespan of old nuclear power plants. Instead, we decided to significantly increase the share of renewable energy. The government announced that there is no problem with the power reserve ratio even if old nuclear power plants are stopped and new nuclear power plants are not built in view of the increasing demand for electricity, but the variable of expanding the supply of electric vehicles is missing from this plan. Taeyong narrowed his eyes. What? Then this is your responsibility. Isn't that exactly our responsibility? If we hadn't invested, electric vehicles wouldn't have spread so quickly. Then this issue will be delayed a bit. If the demand for electricity continues to increase, will there be a problem even if the nuclear power plant is phased out? Nuclear power is responsible for the base generation of electricity. Base power generation means that it operates 24 hours a day and is responsible for the base of electricity. This area is filled by nuclear power plants and coal power plants, which are inexpensive. Then when demand increases, LNG power plants are fully operated. What if we still can't meet the electricity demand? Then blackout. In other words, there is a great blackout. Electricity is the foundation of modern civilization. No civilization can exist without electricity. The conclusion is that electricity consumption will increase explosively in the future, and the amount of power generation needs to be increased. As for how to increase it, people will have different opinions. Taejayu said. When you watch movies or novels, you hear that a huge energy source like nuclear fusion comes out and solves all problems at once. Professor Ho-min Kim grinned. Maybe one day it really will be. But right now it's too much. New technologies don't just pop out one day, but are built on the basis of existing technologies. Not to mention laptops and smartphones, even a simple machine such as a toaster can be made only if the technological prowess of society as a whole rises to a certain level. It was possible because the technology of the existing LFP and NCM batteries was the basis for making the OTK battery. Professor, what do you think about nuclear phase-out? At my question, Professor Ho-min Kim said while scratching his head. I am in favor of increasing the share of renewable energy. It is the opposite in terms of stopping nuclear power generation. There is no other alternative at this time. The dangers of nuclear power need not be overstated. In the event of an accident, the damage is unpredictable. There have been 3 nuclear power plant accidents. Smile Island in the US, Chernobyl in the USSR and Fukushima in Japan. It is a catastrophe both environmentally and economically. For this reason, after the most recent Fukushima nuclear accident, many countries have declared nuclear phase-out. This includes Korea. Even if nuclear power is phased out, it is not like Japan or Taiwan. Rather, the number of nuclear power plants is increasing in this government. But from now on, we are going to create a roadmap for nuclear phase-out. Countries that have phased out nuclear power have faced their own set of difficulties. Japan stopped operating nuclear power plants and significantly increased LNG power generation. However, since Japan does not produce natural gas, of course, it has to depend entirely on imports. As LNG imports for power generation surged and energy prices rose, Japan's trade balance turned into a deficit. In the end, the Japanese government could not stand it any longer and declared the restart of nuclear power plants. Germany has significantly increased thermal power generation as well as renewable energy. The fuel for power generation is lignite produced in Germany. Germany has long been famous for its coal production. Lignite is of low quality and generates enormous pollutants. As air pollution worsened, Germany was forced to turn to LNG power generation. Fortunately, there are countries near Germany that are plentiful of natural gas. That's Russia. Germany has begun construction of additional gas pipelines to import Russian natural gas. There are concerns about Russia's growing influence in Europe, but there is no other way to keep nuclear free. Taiwan completely shut down its nuclear power plants, and instead operated full-fledged thermal power plants. However, when one thermal power plant stopped while the electricity reserve ratio had fallen to a dire level, an unprecedented blackout occurred in which 2/3 of the entire country was cut off. In the end, through a referendum, Taiwan decided to abolish its nuclear-free policy and resume operation of nuclear power plants. There are 2 serious problems with thermal power generation. One is that it emits a lot of fine dust and greenhouse gases. Taeyong nodded his head. In order not to eat radiation, you have to drink fine dust. Which one has the higher risk of death? Although nuclear power has a risk of radiation leakage, it emits very little fine dust and greenhouse gases. Excluding concerns about accidents and waste disposal, it is the most eco-friendly energy. You know what the other problems are, don't you? It means that the price and supply of fuel are unstable. Even without taking the oil shock as an example, raw material prices fluctuate frequently. This can be easily seen by looking at OPEC's announcement of a production cut or oil prices fluctuating due to damage to drilling facilities in the North Sea. In particular, in the case of Korea, the exchange rate risk must also be considered as it is entirely dependent on imports of energy. An increase in energy imports reduces the trade balance, and a decrease in the trade balance increases the exchange rate. And the higher the exchange rate, the higher the energy price. Another important fact is that in all countries that have phased out nuclear power, electricity prices have risen significantly. Nuclear power is cheap. If this is replaced by other power generation, the electricity cost will inevitably rise. Japan soared 30% and Germany nearly doubled. The burden on general households is also a burden, but it is fatal for companies as the manufacturing cost rises. Taejayu said, "What if we increase renewable energy? Of course we need to increase it. However, the situation in Korea is not very good in many ways. A solar panel can generate electricity properly for at most 3 or 4 hours a day. It will be less on cloudy days. For wind power, a wind speed of at least 6 meters per second must blow continuously and must be at least a certain distance away from the residents. The biggest problem is that there are no neighboring countries to share electricity with like Germany. However, electricity cannot be exchanged with North Korea. In any case, the demand for electricity is continuously increasing, and the amount of power generation must continue to increase. Whether it be nuclear power, thermal power, or renewable energy. After the Fukushima disaster, many countries declared nuclear phase-out or reduction of nuclear power plants, but recently the atmosphere has completely changed. There is a consensus that we have no choice but to rely on nuclear power for now. Countries that are currently planning to build nuclear power plants are not alone. USA, Russia, China, UK, Japan, Netherlands, Philippines, Saudi Arabia, and so on. Unlike thermal power plants that any country can build, few countries have the technology to build nuclear power plants. Currently, the countries that can be counted among the world's most powerful nuclear power include the United States, Russia, China, Japan, France, and Korea. Although Korea is a latecomer, it has operated several nuclear power plants in Korea without problems for a long time and has exported power several times. As Korea has announced that it will phase out nuclear power, it has no choice but to turn its eyes to overseas markets, so domestic companies are fiercely competing to win overseas orders. But the atmosphere is not very good. Currently, the government is implementing a two-track strategy for nuclear power plants. It is said that while promoting a policy to phase out nuclear power in Korea, it will actively support export of nuclear power plants abroad. It's not that it doesn't make sense at all, but it's bound to lower the credibility of the antinomy logic. Taeyong nodded his head. Hey, if Japanese kids don't eat seafood from Fukushima and export them saying that they can eat it with confidence, which country would trust them? No one thinks nuclear power is good. So, will everything be solved if we get rid of nuclear power in one day? Professor Haman Kim shook his head. If that was possible, I would have done it sooner. If all nuclear power plants in the world were to be shut down, would other power generation be able to cover that amount of electricity? It can't be. If that happens, the prices of coal, oil, and natural gas in the commodity markets will jump many times right now. In fact, after the Fukushima nuclear disaster, several countries including Japan, stopped operating nuclear power plants, and energy prices rose significantly. Taekyu asked, "Then what should I do?" Well, as the technology advances further, the problem may be solved. Maybe even worse. However, we cannot give up all the advantages of civilization and return to the primitive era. In the end, humans have no choice but to live by destroying nature. But he has to figure out how to slow it down as much as possible. Professor Haman Kim, seeing our expressions, said with a smile, "No need to worry too much. Because humans always find a solution. The next generation may be able to solve problems that our generation could not solve. All we have to do is hand over the problem in a solvable state. I'm so sorry if I hand it over without an answer. I found and read energy-related materials and papers. Yuri worked hard to organize and classify the materials and bring them back." Taekyu said while holding a thesis. Because fusion power is the best. The energy of the future is nuclear fusion. I'm here too. It's called nuclear fusion. Who doesn't know that? Nuclear fusion is a process in which the kinetic energy of atomic nuclei heated to a very high temperature increases, overcoming repulsive force, And when atomic nuclei collide, strong nuclear force action occurs and bonds. I don't know what this means, but it is said that nuclear fusion generates a lot of energy. The energy produced in this way is more efficient and more stable than nuclear power, and it does not emit radiation, greenhouse gases, or fine dust. If commercialized, all of humanity's energy problems can be solved at once. Unfortunately, the theory is almost established, but commercialization is expected to take some time. Gong millet. When you play gong millet, doesn't something come out? I'm already doing it. All kinds of experts are sticking to it and continuing research and experimentation, so it could be really commercialized in 10 or 20 years. Is that a problem by then? Let's think about it. Before the Industrial Revolution, electricity is essential in modern society. Many people worry about food security, but energy security is a bigger issue. Even if the import of food is cut off for about a month, it can somehow survive, but for coal or oil, even if the import is cut off for just a week, there is a riot. For this reason, all countries are striving to secure a stable energy source. Energy is also directly related to hegemony. It is thanks to oil and natural gas that Russia, which had once collapsed by declaring default, has revived, and it is thanks to the shale revolution that the US has risen to become a superpower again. On the other hand, the OPEC countries that dominated the world by causing 2 oil shocks are losing their former status. Is there no solution for this right now? Thinking so, I saw Taekyu suddenly staring into the air with a blank expression on his face. What are you doing? No, I want to remind myself of Yeji if I do this too. Professor Kiran Mohan stopped by China to attend a geological conference, and then he came to Korea. We reunited in Seoul and shook hands warmly. His assistant Carrie Cartwright was also there. Welcome to Korea. It's nice to meet you here. Haha, come to think of it, this is the first time I've seen it in Korea. Professor Mohan coughed. Beijing's air wasn't good, but Seoul isn't too bad either. It's gotten worse these days. Since you've been to California where the air is fresh, you'll feel even worse. Even in Korea, professors have high social status. Not to mention he is a professor at the California Institute of Technology, a world-renowned university. It is no exaggeration to say that he is now a world-class scholar, as he accurately predicted the big one and was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. As Korea is not a safe zone for earthquakes, Professor Mohan's visit was quite a big issue. It is characteristic of politicians to put a spoon quickly in such a case. Needless to say, there was a rush of requests from lawmakers to meet. Professor Mohan politely declined, stating that his schedule was already full of lectures, meetings, and interviews. The lecture was held at Korea University and I also attended. I went ahead and introduced a professor who had met other professors. Professor Myung-Joon Kim was very pleased. Professor Haman Kim also came up. Since they met the other day, the two have been in constant contact and have been like friends. There must be something in common among scholars. Even before the lecture started, students, professors, and reporters flocked in like clouds. Professor Mohan talked about the earthquake situation in Korea and the dangers of recent climate change for 2 hours, and everyone listened intently. After the lecture, people lined up to get autographs from those who brought books. Somehow, I was in a position to sign autographs with me. If you look at this, it means that I'm pretty popular too. Read more at wuxiax.com. Professor Mohan decided to have dinner with the staff of OTK Company. Hyunju's older sister Henry and Ellie were also there. What would you like to eat? Professor Mohan pondered for a moment, then he said, when I come to Korea, I want to try samgyeopsal. Carrie clapped her hands. Me too. My Korean friends recommended me to try it. Taeyong nodded his head. What do you know? It's pork belly rather than steak. Taekyu made a reservation directly to the pork belly restaurant he usually goes to. I like going to a place where the staff cooks pork belly. Why? Because meat cooked by others is the most delicious. There's a point. We rented a whole pork belly restaurant near the company. Since there were no other people's eyes, I was able to eat comfortably after a long time. I bumped into Professor Mohan and a glass of soju. Are you going back to America when you're done? Professor Mohan shook his head. I'm going straight to Moscow from here. Are you from Russia? What happened? I have someone to meet. Professor Nikolai Petrov is a nuclear physicist at Moscow University. At that moment, something flashed in front of my eyes. After a while, when I woke up, the people around me were staring at me. I put down the chopsticks that were holding the pork belly and said as calmly as possible, Who is that professor?